Welcome to the Dad Show Podcast, a show all about impacting, empowering, inspiring, and uplifting information to become a better dad, husband, man, and mentor. And now, your host, Ryan Ladd.
Welcome to the Dad Show Podcast. How y'all doing? Today is part 5.
I was at training in Nashville for Enterprise, and we had been texting, and she, like I said, I've been trying to get her to date me, and everybody had left. Our friend group had left, and we really were the only two left in Cookeville. So we were still going out and hanging out, but it was just as friends. And she was on her way back, and she was texting me, and I was like, "How did it go?" And she was like, "Oh, I think it went really great." Maybe an hour later or something, she texted me. She said, "Hey, I just got a call from this company, and they want to make me a job offer." And so I'm like, "Well, there it goes. There's my chance. That ship's sailing." And I texted her and I said, "Well, did you take it?" And she said, "No." And so I replied back and I was like, "Why?" And she wrote back and said, "You." So I went back from training, and then on her doorstep, I kissed her for the first time. And then 6 months later, we got engaged. So I tricked her and finally convinced her. But
did you do a little hypnotization?
I did. Yeah. It was a super sweet story and something that we talk about often. But yeah, from that point, it moved pretty quickly. And like I said, then we ended up quitting my job on my lunch break, and then the rest of the story picks back up. But yeah, so I guess to go back really where, I said the wheels fell off. This is, I guess, the last sort of part of if you will, my testimony. But so we'd gotten to that point, we'd found success, and completely turned our back on God, on religion, on church, on all of it. And during that time, the grind of working K2 and the long hours and what have you, I had been on and off Adderall for like ADHD and things of that nature throughout pretty much all of my early adulthood. Never had an issue with it. In fact, in a lot of ways, it was very beneficial. It was the only medication that I ended up on and stayed on after I'd quit, all the different mental health medications and things that led to the suicide attempt. And I was on it then. And as some people do, I just started abusing it, so started taking more and more to be able to work more, to stay up later, to just, to just get stuff done. I mean, we'd gotten to the point where the business grew way too quick. And so when we talk about, the contracts and the amount of money and stuff that was coming in and the growth, there was obviously a lot of money going out. The thing that got very interesting in that business model is cash flow. So all of your vendors that you're buying media with, they all have different terms. Yeah. Most of them are you owe your bills within 90 days. It's net 90. Some are 60, some are 30, some are 120, some will work with you, right? Some are like, hey, as long as you're giving us a certain amount of money every month, like we'll just keep this relationship going. But when you imagine that you've got all these different buys that you're buying on behalf of all this other money coming in.
Oh, yeah.
So we'll put it this way. You make a buy on a co-op program. That company, that business doesn't hit their quota that month. So they have to lag a month, or the fund gets lower, what have you. You're trying to make a lot of stars align within the terms of what you owe money to the vendors.
Yeah.
And so we ran into a huge cash flow issue. We had a joke at the office, and my staff at one point got me some croquis on the sunglasses that said the check's in the mail, because that was always the excuse, and you try to get money. It's in the mail. We've mailed it.
Yeah.
I was like, are we hand delivering, at the post office nowadays?
Yeah.
Or like where is every check getting lost to K2, right?
Yeah.
And so there was always this issue with cash flow, and we ran into a really difficult situation in late 2017. And what ended up happening is iHeartMedia, we owed them a pretty substantial amount of money. The money always came.
Yeah.
Our accounts receivable was as legit as any. It was just, it was always a little bit off on when it came.
Yeah.
And so we had gone to iHeart, and we were a bit behind on some vendors, and we tried to negotiate some terms, and some things went south, and probably made some comments that didn't need to be made, and frustrated some folks out there. And so long story short, they went to one of our biggest clients and said, essentially, hey, K2's not paying your bill. They're buying on your behalf. They're spending your money. You're paying them, but they're not paying your bill. Well, like any other business, we look at it as all the money comes in and then all the money goes out.
Yeah.
At that point, we're not buying on behalf of Miracle Ford and just specifically taking their money and paying Miracle Ford's vendor bills, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
We're looking at it as all this money comes in, and we've got all this money due.
Yeah.
And as long as we're hitting that every month, then it's just like any other business,
Yeah.
right? You don't go do a landscaping project, right?
Yeah.
And have bought a lawnmower, and because I paid you for using that lawnmower, you're going and taking that money and directly making sure that you pay that lawnmower, right? You're just looking at the business operation and running it that way. That obviously didn't set well. And they dropped. They pulled their contract.
Wow.
And then from there, another one found out and they pulled. And then they started talking and they pulled and they pulled. And so we went from just this high of high to an absolute scramble.
What time frame?
This took place 2 months later. I started cutting staff.
Wow.
I let go of the first 2 or 3 employees. It intensified, and over probably 6 to 8 months, I think we were back down to like 2 employees and Rami and myself.
So we're talking about a time frame of less than 2 years that you went basically from nothing
to extreme success. We're talking multi-million gross as a company. We're talking not even shy of a couple 100,000 gross. This is not obviously what we were taking home, not even remotely close, but just as a business in that first year to over $1 million the next. And then in year 3, we're talking, several.
Wow.
To
6 to 8 months, nothing.
Almost nothing.
Yeah. Wow.
Because when the wheels started to fall off, they fail.
Yeah.
And you can imagine you're talking, these are big accounts. They were big contracts. Obviously when it first started to happen, we went to the banks and tried to get, a line of credit or something.
Yeah.
And the justification was like, look at our accounts receivable. We've got 2 years of great accounts receivable. And you can see here, everything always came and the money did always come.
Yeah.
We're like, it's just not always coming in the time frame that we need it. We need funding. But I'm 27 at the time, we have a mortgage on a house, but we don't own anything outright. The business consists of an office we pay rent on and a bunch of MacBook Pros. Like we have no collateral. We have nothing for them to come, leverage the bank.
Yeah.
And we just couldn't get a loan.
Hindsight, there's some people I'm sure I could have called and had them co-sign and do some things like that. And other business owners that I now know that if they'd have looked at our accounts receivable, probably would have been like, I'll give you the money.
Yeah.
Can I be an equity partner?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Because the model that we had worked. It's just we ran into a cash flow and really an ignorance problem, and I didn't know how it worked, and I didn't know how to secure funding. And so, like I said, when the wheels fell off, and we lost everything. I at that time was addicted to Adderall. I was doctor shopping and getting it from multiple doctors, which it ended up finding out. And so overnight, I'd lost pretty much all my well-being financially and all of the drugs that were holding me up. And went into withdrawal and just a miserable time. This was actually, we had Briggs at this point. So Briggs was born through all of this. So here I am, unable to provide financially, unable to provide as a father mentally and stability. Like I just was a mess.
Yeah.
And that same time, this was 2018. So in 2018, I also had finished out my contract with the National Guard. And while I was in with the National Guard, I had a life insurance policy. Well, getting out of that, I lost my insurance. Kaylee not working.
Yeah.
And me being a small business owner, our insurance was supplied by TRICARE through the military. And so the first thing I did was like, hey, I need to apply for a civilian life insurance policy. So I went down to the local shelter agent there in Cookeville, and took out a life insurance policy. And, they come out and they do a physical. And they came to my house, they did the physical or what have you. I'm again coming out of probably a month now of withdrawals, and finally, honestly, to the point where I was able to get out of bed and start to get on the computer again and do anything.
Yeah.
And a week or so later, I got an email that said that my life insurance policy got denied. And so I'm like, okay, why? And so I had to request the results or what have you. And And so I ended up getting them, and my liver enzymes were like in the thousands, like my AST, ALT, bilirubin, like anything liver related was teetotally jacked up.
Wow.
So I'm like, well, obviously some of that, the extent of the withdrawal and all that is like, because there was a time during that when I remember talking to Kaylee and I'm like, something is not right.
Yeah.
This is not just withdrawal. Like I've gone through withdrawals from other substances and things like that. And this is something is more. And so when we got that report back, it was like, okay, we got something. I'm not also no longer healthy. Like this stress, this anxiety, this business literally has almost killed me.
Yeah.
And so I started seeing a client of mine was a clinic. So I went to him and he started running tests, and we ran tests for a couple of weeks. He ended up running a test for hepatitis C. And so the way that they run this blood work, as you I'm sure know, is they test for antibodies. Mm-hmm. Right? So if you're positive for an antibody, they assume you have the virus.
Yeah.
And I tested positive for hepatitis C antibodies. And so he calls me up one day. He's like, dude, you've got hepatitis C. And I'm like, obviously, you know, I'd only seen what I'd seen on commercials and stuff like that. So I do what everybody does, and I went to Google. And it's terrible. I mean, that's a terrible disease.
Oh, yeah.
So we're going back through like how, you know, first of all, you know, I never did, I never what was intravenous in whatever, what it's drugs that are.
Yeah. You're not shooting up at all. Yeah.
Right. You know, I've got tattoos, but they were with reputable, you know, stuff like that. So I'm like, I have no idea how I could get, you know, hepatitis C. Long story short, I didn't have insurance, and there was a program there. So there's a medication now called Epclusa, and it had recently come out, and it's essentially a cure for Hep C. And so I'm like, that's a positive. Because he told me, he said, when he called and told me, he said, but the good thing is that they are careful about calling it a cure. It'll go into full remediation and live a normal life.
Yeah.
It's like $1,000 a day for the pill. Yeah.
Wow.
I take a pill for a year. And so
basically $365,000
more. We didn't have any money. We was broke again, you know, like broke, owing money. And so obviously I'm like, how can anything get any worse than this? There was a program that I applied for, not having insurance. Not having insurance was God sent. Had I had insurance, it would have broke us.
Yeah.
Not having insurance, I was able to qualify for a program where you could be considered as part of like another trial and this, that, and the other, and I could do it for free.
Wow.
Literally for free. I applied, got approved, this, that, and the other. He goes to get ready to put me on this medication, and the last test they have to run is a viral load test, essentially to see how much of the virus. My understanding is to kind of see how much milligram of medication or whatever they scientifically do to decide what to put you on. So I get this viral load test, and I get a call a day later, and he's like, dude, you don't have hepatitis C. He's like, you've got the antibody, but you don't have the disease.
Wow.
And if you look up, like that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
It's not a thing. And so here we go. We go down a rabbit hole for like maybe 6 months, this is 2018, 6 months, a year maybe. And I ended up at some specialty doctors and this, that, and the other, and had a biopsy and what have you. And luckily they sent it off to Vanderbilt. It got to that point, that intense, and they sent it to the liver unit there at Vanderbilt, and it was like the same day they diagnosed it with autoimmune hepatitis. And so,
never heard of that.
Nobody has. Yeah. It's called AIH. It's extremely rare. In fact, I think if you look it up, there's like maybe 20,000 cases a year or something like that. I mean, it's extremely rare, and maybe less than that, and 90% in women. So I'm like, here we go. Here we are. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
The rarest of rare, and then subcategory of that is even more rare. No cure, right? And the only thing you can do is like most autoimmune diseases, try to get it under control. And so I went on a very heavy dose of prednisone to get this inflammation and stuff in the liver, to get the liver enzymes down, and then an immune suppressant drug to lower my immune system or the activity, so that my body would essentially stop attacking my liver.
Yeah.
And we still don't know to this day how you get it, what it's caused by. My mom has an autoimmune disease. I don't know if that has anything to do with it. I would imagine it's a lot of substance abuse and stress and things like that.
Yeah.
But long story short, and we have no idea where it came from or why. That was 2018. I had since hung up the business and had taken a job out in Nashville when I was going through this process. I was driving back and forth to Nashville, and I got the call to tell me what it was. And so I remember getting off the phone and again went to Google, the worst thing you could do. And the first statement that popped up said that autoimmune patient life expectancy is like 5 to 10 years.
Wow.
I since went on to read further after that shock that it is, if gone untreated and not able to essentially get it into remission.
Yeah. But
you can imagine, I mean, I was devastated.
Yeah.
I'm driving home from Nashville after work and I'm like shaking, essentially getting ready to call Kaylee. And
thank you for coming to watch part 5 and come back tomorrow for part 6. Thank you for listening to the Dad Show podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Dad Show podcast. Please like, review, and subscribe.